Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, Real-World Data Governance, a Day in the Life of a Reference Data Steward. I would like to start by introducing you to today's speakers. We have Jack Savak. He is a Semantic Solutions Architect with TopQuadrant, and we also have Jesse Lambert, who is also a Semantic Solutions Architect with TopQuadrant. This webinar is the third in our series, Spotlighting Applied Data Governance. In today's webinar, we transition to a day in the life of a reference data steward. In his role, the data steward manages the use of reference data originating within the enterprise, as well as reference data sets maintained externally by organizations responsible for industry standards. We will describe and demonstrate the benefits of managing reference data as part of a larger data governance initiative. But before we get started, let's review a few logistical items. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along by using your GoToWebinar controls. To post questions, please look on the right-hand side control panel. You should see a drop-down box for questions. If you click on the box, you should be able to post your questions at any time during today's presentation. We will address as many of those questions as time permits at the conclusion of the webinar. We will also have included a couple of polling questions throughout today's presentation, and we appreciate any feedback that you can give us. We will also be recording today's webinar, and we'll send a link to that recorded version. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jack to get us started.
All right. Thank you, Christy. Let's move right into today's program about reference data management with TopRight Edge. A few words about TopQuadrant. We believe that capturing the meaning of information is essential, and it's our strong commitment to standards-based approaches to data semantics that makes this possible. Our mission simply is to make enterprise information meaningful. And in today's webinar, we'll be demoing how TopRight Edge governance technologies create meaningful relationships in enterprise information to help speed and ensure effective use of reference data in real-world applications. We have substantial experience with many large clients and government agencies. You can see a few here across many sectors. What we actually do is implement TopRight Edge to build enterprise governance infrastructures that meet strategic and regulatory requirements. Reference data, as I'll discuss, is key to many of these initiatives. To get oriented before jumping into the product demo, I want to talk very briefly about reference data and especially its relationship to data governance to make sure that we're all on the same page. Talk a little about what it is, why we might need to govern it, how to get started, and finally, Jesse will pick up to demo how Edge with reference data management, TopQuadrant's governance framework, helps with this. Reference data is critical data with critical impact. It's typically found as lookup or code table data associated with various other kinds of information. For example, business intelligence, operations, product and customer data. And it's a high value target for governance because mission critical applications use reference data specifically to classify and categorize other kinds of data. Some reference data, like product IDs, for example, may be internally developed, sometimes called private, and other reference data, such as ISO country codes, may be externally developed and maintained publicly by standards bodies. TopRight Edge supports both internal and external reference data, and today in the demo, you'll see Jesse work with both product ID and country code data. Reference data needs to be governed because there's big problems when it's not. Finding, trusting, and understanding information is increasingly problematic. And for it to be valuable, actionable information needs to be available, timely, and trustworthy. When reference data is not trustworthy, it has major impacts because it is so pervasive and because of the diversity of consuming applications and systems. It's been estimated to make up 40 to 70% of the data used in financial transactions. And same table can occur in many different applications, impacting diverse activities. Faulty reference data can even cause monetary loss due to potential transaction failures. You can see the impact of these problems pretty obviously in this cartoon. metadata describing which codes are needed is missing, and it causes confusion. People in the illustration really don't know which product code set to use. And this is just one example. Other kinds of problems include errors from lack of governance when updating code lists and coding errors. There can be miscommunication across enterprise systems. And finally, decentralized ad hoc reference data management is costly and error-prone. A shared understanding of the meaning of the reference data is essential to its effective use and governance. In general, poorly governed reference data causes problems. And Christy, I'm going to hand it back to you to share our first quick poll.
Great, thank you, Jack. If you can go ahead and launch that poll. And this is the first of two polls that we'll be asking for your feedback on, and Jack will launch that question. Here we go. The question is, what does your organization use today to manage reference data? So if you can just take a second and choose one of the following. Are you using spreadsheets or custom-built solutions, an ERP or other enterprise application, an MDM vendor platform or hierarchy management tool, a commercial purpose-built reference data management solution, or a reference data management solution in a comprehensive data governance solution? So we'll just give another couple of seconds for folks to respond. And Jack, it looks like we may have everyone's response.
Okay, so
if you want to go ahead and launch that result, we'll share the results with
let me do
attendees.
that. You should see it, Christy.
Oh, there it is. Okay, it's a pretty good mix with the majority of you on spreadsheets, with few of you using the commercial purpose-built RDM solution. So again, thank you for taking the time to do that. And Jack, I'll let you proceed.
All right, great. Can you see my slides again?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, swell. So we talked about the problem. If the problem is scattered, poorly governed reference data, what's the solution? Well, first would be to centralize the scattered reference data. And second, to improve the reference data governance. We could do this by developing governance policies for usage, metadata tagging, authorization, notifications, and approvals. We could execute these policies as tasks, which you'll be seeing in a moment in the demo, can monitor and approve the completion of these tasks, and finally to enforce ongoing reference data compliance with these policies. TopRight Edge for reference data management offers an alternative. Edge is a comprehensive data governance environment, and in addition to reference data management, it enables flexible governance of business glossaries, taxonomies, and ontologies, metadata management, if and when you're ready. Collectively, TopRight Edge assets, governance workflows, dashboards, and visualizations enable your governance teams to easily collaborate, catalog, connect, and curate your reference data. I could say much more about Edge, but I'm going to shift gears because today's demo starts here. We're going to take a look at how all this happens in the real world, and Jesse is about to demonstrate what's actually involved in practice. Our demo will explore the management of reference data about product IDs and country codes. Jesse will be discussing these codes and importing them into Edge to make meaningful connections among them. Doing this involves three basic steps. First, there's preparation, gathering information about sources and locations of existing reference data, and Jesse's done some of this prior to the demo. Edge offers the capabilities to help, but will not be demonstrating this today. Second, importing the relevant data that's been found into Edge reference data sets, and this allows Edge to centralize the control, management, governance, and distribution of the reference data. Finally, the reference data that's been imported can be meaningfully connected to models of the company's data assets and to other reference data by direct associations and by crosswalk mappings to meaningfully analyze, compare, and understand their impact. Today's demo is going to start in a company that's developing its data governance initiative. A priority is bringing reference data under governance. What does it mean to manage reference data within a broader governance environment? It means being aware of your reference data, controlling its quality, and ensuring that it's used uniformly and correctly across the enterprise. TopRight Edge with reference data management enables data professionals to centralize and track the responsibility, collaboration, management, source control, and distribution of reference data. We want our data to involve people in real-world situations, so we're going to dive into a day in the life of Tony, who's a reference data steward. And Jesse will be using TopRight Edge as Tony to work with Bob, the data governance officer. And I want to orient you to Tony's day. Tony's work starts today as he notices several new reference data tasks assigned by Bob, the data governance officer. TopRight Edge will enable Tony to see what he needs to see, in this case, reference data and the tasks created by colleagues, to do what he needs to do, which would be to centralize the control and distribution of reference data, to understand what he's doing, and dashboards, live links to connected data, and comparison reports for change control will help with that. And finally, to extend the value of his work by connecting to information assets elsewhere in the organization. Tony will be using formal approval workflows to collaborate with Bob, our data governance officer, who assigns, reviews, and is responsible for Tony's work. And that's pretty much as far as I can take us with an introduction. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jesse, for a day in the life of Tony, a reference data steward. Jesse?
All right, and hello everyone. As Jack said, I'm going to be playing the role of Tony today, a reference data steward. In the upper right-hand corner where I'm trying to point with my mouse, you'll see that I am actually signed in as Tony. So I'll be doing everything in his name. And actually here on the TopRight Edge homepage, I can see my tasks, and it looks like my tasks are coming out of the governance model, where I know Bob is our data governance officer, and he's looking at the governance model and policies and procedures. And at times he creates the issues that are attached to those, and that's all modeling and characteristics that can be done right here inside of TopRight Edge. And then he attaches tasks to those. And you can see I have 3 major tasks here that I have to do today. They're quite involved, but TopRight Edge is going to help me get these done quickly. Another way that I can see my tasks is to actually go underneath the find task capability here on the left-hand side that I'm pointing at. And that's where I'm going to go today to actually filter down using the filters, but mine are all in view here, so I can actually just jump right to them. And my first task that I want to accomplish today, it has a description of no product ID catalog available. And really what that's saying is that there's no product catalog of the codes of the types of products that my company is dealing with here. And we're going to load that today. So I'm going to leave this open, and I'm going to get started right away by navigating to the reference datasets option on the left-hand side here. And there's a lot of asset collection capabilities inside of TopBraid Edge. The theme for today is primarily reference datasets, so that's what I'll be in most of the time. On this view here, you can see that we have internal country codes and an ISO country codes reference dataset available to me, and I can see these because of the permissions that I have inside of TopRight Edge. But what I need right now, because I'm going to focus on that first task, which is to bring product codes, the product catalog under governance, so that it's not being maintained simply inside of a spreadsheet that's hard to share, hard to maintain, hard to discover. And we're going to bring it into centralized data governance inside of TopRight Edge. So I'll click on the create new reference data set here, and I'm going to call this product catalog. I should provide a nice rich description of what the product catalog actually is. And then my last choice here is to choose the model that is used to represent the contents of this spreadsheet. So another steward probably would have done this for me. I already have the product model available here, so I'll select that. And that product model, Tony knows, was actually auto-generated because of the same spreadsheet. but it's auto-generating a model that describes the contents, so that instead of just being string data inside of a spreadsheet, we're going to represent this as objects and relationships that are actual things and not just strings any longer. So I can click the Create Reference Dataset there, and I now have a new empty container ready to receive those products. Now, the products that it's going to receive is this spreadsheet right here. So I've got product codes, that's my primary reference data set here, but I've got labels, product codes, product lines, and an interesting piece here is this country, product manufacturing country, and it's just a numeric value. Well, we have country reference data inside of TopRight Edge already, and we'll see that. But right here, what I want to just point out is that when I finally load this data, this won't just be a numeric reference any longer. It's actually going to connect to that country code that internal country code reference data set that is already inside of TopRight Edge. But I just wanted to highlight this for you here so that we don't lose a focus on that. And before I import, I'm actually going to adjust a couple settings here. And the way that we get that powerful connection to my internal country codes is to actually tell this container that it can see, that it has access to that other container that stores the countries. So I can actually use my includes window here, and I'm going to start typing in country, and I want my product ID reference data set to have visibility to my country codes internal reference data set. And that's all I have to do to connect those. And then I'm actually going to edit some of the metadata about the actual container itself. And this is where we can actually describe what applications have access to this, who's using it, and a lot of other rich characteristics. But I'm going to keep it simple here today. Clicking on edit, what I want to do is I want to set the main entity. I want to tell this container that it is focused on countries. That it is focused on product. And you notice country is accessible here because the model knows that products are associated to countries because of that one column. So I'm going to choose product and save these changes. And I also want to make sure that my property definitions, the primary piece of reference data here is the actual product code. So I'm going to set that as well. And with that, I can now go back and get busy loading from the spreadsheet. Starting here, I'm going to launch the user interface that helps me bring in that content. So I can choose my file, and I'm going to choose my products. The model knows that the primary entity now is products because of that setting that I just put in place under the settings tab. Clicking next, I'll be presented with the next step, which is to choose how to parse that spreadsheet. You're provided with a sampling of the spreadsheet, and you can see there's nothing complex about it. We actually saw the Excel spreadsheet as well. There's nothing complex about it. No separators, no hierarchy. If there was, TopRight Edge would be able to handle it, but I'm going to be able to get away with no hierarchy here. And then I'm provided with my last step. And this is where you can see the spreadsheet column are actually being mapped to target properties in that product model. So because the product model was based on the spreadsheet, it's a one-to-one, and TopRight Edge has already provided the mappings for me. And if there was differences or a different syntax here, you would actually be able to choose what properties you were trying to target from those for those columns. And with that, I can click finish. And what do we have? If I go back over to the codes view, you'll see what we call our table view, very much so like a spreadsheet. It's a common kind of user experience. And if I click on any one of these, for example, like aloe relief, if all of the metadata can't be shown in the column views, all of the metadata is available on the right-hand side here. And I can resize this. So it depends on what kind of data you have, but you can make all the space that you need here with it being resizable. Here I can now do things like edit, managing it with custom edits. I can start a workflow on these concepts, these objects now, And a workflow would be an approval chain, you know, for changes and edits, and then getting approval and committing to the production copy. I can create tasks at this level actually. So if we wanted to task someone specifically to update allo relief, we would be able to do that here. And I would also be able to just leave a comment. So if I wanted to start a conversation or ask a question about the content, this is all of the different kinds of collaboration features that we have, and notifications can also be attached to these collaboration features so that people are made aware of things that are going on inside of this environment. And those things are difficult to do to something as simple as a spreadsheet. And that's the point of bringing this data under centralized data governance now. The data is pretty simple from that spreadsheet, but you can see now that the product manufacturing country, this is something I want to point out, it's no longer just those numeric values. So I can actually click on this hyperlink to Australia and see the reference data about Australia now. And here is that numeric value that was used to create the semantic relationship to the actual object of Australia that we have other data about, like region code. And then TopRight Edge even provides me the really cool view of the incoming references. So we can see not just allo relief is associated to Australia, but all of these other products. And if I wanted to navigate to those, I could just click on those, and now all of a sudden I'm seeing the metadata about Sunshield. With that, my task is done. It is that quick, that simple to bring a reference data set into governance inside of TopRight Edge. And we used Excel spreadsheet as an example today, but there's a lot of different connectors. I could have pulled this in from a database through APIs, web services, and other formats that we have connectors and transformers for. So with that, I'm actually done, and I can go back to my tasks and check this one off. We do now have product IDs under governance, and I'm going to resolve this one. And I still have a few more tasks, 2 more that are open. My next one is to deal with a different kind of reference data set, and it's the ISO 3166 standard. So I see that Bob, our data governance officer, has given me, graciously has given me to the 23rd to bring ISO 3166 into the most recent version. So let's go ahead and take a look at that right now. Reference data sets, once again on the left-hand side, gets me access to my reference data sets, and I'm going to just go into edit so that we can see what kind of data is in here. And you can see, unlike those internal country codes that were as lightweight as possible, and there was only 20 or so of them representing the countries that my company does business with, we now have this available to us, which is an ISO representation. And there's a lot of richness here, 2-character, 3-character codes, a lot of different languages for the full name and short name. And then we also have the rich feature of dealing with the statuses and other characteristics. So as my company grows, we're going to want to make an evolution to a standard country code set like this. So what we've done is we've started our initiative, and we have an ISO country code data set here. For demo purposes, what we've done is we've brought an old version of ISO 3166 in. So if I start filtering down on the letters CZ here in the filter box, you'll see Czechoslovakia is in existence here. So what we've done is we've traveled back in the time, and this is an ISO 3166 where Czechoslovakia was still in existence. And the update that I'm going to deal with now is going to actually change this country's status and bring the Czech Republic and Slovakia independently into existence. Now, TopRight Edge lets us deal with versioning and updating reference data sets in a few different ways. It really depends on what your governance model is, what governance framework you put into place. And by options, what I mean, for example, is if I go underneath the Manage tabs for this reference data set, I have very quick access to cloning. So what I can do is create an exact replica of the ISO 3166 in case I was wanting to archive it, keep long history of whatever our process was for doing comparison reports in the future. Whatever your reason is, whatever the logic is for needing to basically create an off version from your production copy, let's just say that I want to do version 1.0 here, create my clone, and that quickly I now have that exact replica of my ISO 3166 country codes. And I could get busy here, either doing, like I had said, a comparison report, loading another copy, and then comparing them. But today's approach, I'm going to take a very straightforward updating approach. So I need to go back to my main ISO 3166 country codes, and instead of just dealing with that replica copy, I'm going to actually go into a workflow. And a workflow, actually, let me, I do have an existing workflow, but let's start a new workflow today. Let's start with a new workflow. Here, I can name my workflow. So this is going to be ISO 3166 update. Let's just keep it simple. This is the 3166 update, and it does help to provide descriptions for your workflow so that managers and other stewards can see what's going on inside of these workflows. So I'm going to submit that. And actually, before I do, let me point out, this says basic workflow here. And on the next screen, we're going to get a visualization of what the basic workflow is that's provided out of the box with TopRight Edge. But TopRight provides the tooling to create your own workflows. And those workflows can actually pull governance roles in. So not just like permissions like editor and viewer, but I could actually be called the reference data steward, and I could be pulled into the exact stage of a workflow where I was needed. And then Bob, our data governance officer, for example, he could be called in by his role of data governance officer to provide approval before committing any changes to the production copy. So if I was to have those custom made workflows, I would have a drop down here to choose the exact kind of workflow that was going to be used to accomplish what I need to do. But I'll submit that and we'll get that visualization here on the screen. And what's happening here, a powerful technique is being done, kind of like the cloning. I have a sandboxed version of the production copy now. So what I am, I'm in a workflow, but I'm in a working copy of the production version. And in here, all of my edits, all changes, basically track changes is turned on for review and approval before any commits can be made to the production copy. And this is the kind of visualization you can expect. And this is just the basics. So what it is I have the power actually to freeze it for review, which would put it in the manager's hands, or I could actually choose to make the commit once I've provided any changes here. And what I'm going to do is just jump in quickly to that sandbox copy and bring new data in on top of that. So we'll see this import from spreadsheet once again, but I'm going to choose a different file. It'll be my 3166 English update to countries, and I can click next. There's no hierarchy or complexity inside of my data set, so I can choose no hierarchy. And once again, the semantic model, the target properties, have automatically been mapped up to the spreadsheet columns for me. But I want to make a couple changes here. Status is not just being brought in as a string. Status is being brought in as enumerations. So it's important to get those relationships in place properly, and they should map off of the label of the status enumerations that we have modeled. And let's make sure that we're bringing English English full names and short names in. And I do want to override anything that is in existence right now with the update. So let's go ahead and click finish, and this is going to parse that new data set. What I can do is go to the reports mechanism, which gives me access to the comparison report that I've mentioned a few different times today. And in a working copy, it knows instantly to just compare the working copy to the production copy. So I'm going to click on that. and it's going to provide me with a view that I'm very familiar with here. So let me just explain this a little bit. We're looking at these columns. So we're looking here, 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 and here. So the 4 different columns. And Czechoslovakia is one of the objects that have changed with this update that we just performed. And it was to take its status from officially assigned to formerly used. And then we have the Czech Republic here and Slovakia here being brought into existence and having all of their ISO metadata available. And you can see everything is in green here. So this is actually new content that's being created. And it's that easy for me to actually bring in an update of a public or external type of reference data that changes regularly, right? So subscription data, standards bodies data changes quarterly, annually, whatever it is, and you need to be able to make those adaptations when you need to. And TopRight Edge, we see in this task here today that I have some options. I can create clones and just bring in a whole new version and version it off, or I can use the controlled workflows to bring updates in on top of the existing data. With that, I can actually go back to my task again and mark another one of these as done. So let's move this from open to resolved. And I now have one more open ticket. What's this one? Oh, okay, I need to do a crosswalk. So another important thing with dealing with those kinds of changes, either in versions or updates, but between different different copies or different representations of the same kind of data, a crosswalk is a really good tool to get the connections into place. And that's what TopRight Edge is all about. So we're going to use a crosswalk to make connections between that internal, that very simple internal country code data and the ISO country codes themselves. So on the left-hand side here, I'm finally done working with the reference data sets, and I get to go play with crosswalks. And there are no crosswalks in here, so the screen's empty, but I can choose create new at the top here. So we want to crosswalk ISO, or I want to crosswalk internal to ISO 3166, providing a description of what I have here. And so that I can describe actually what is going on here, what we are doing is we're putting very lightweight relationships. We're going to put a close match relationship between objects of different collections inside of TopRight Edge. So we need the first collection or catalog, that's be the country codes internal, and the second collection or catalog being the ISO 3166 country codes that we have. And the objects that we're trying to bring into comparison or mappings is the country objects from each of these models. So the models that are behind each of these vocabularies, we want the country objects to be compared to each other. And I can click finish. And let's jump into our mappings. I'm going to close that left-hand side here and focus here. We see on the left-hand side here in the grayish color, we see the from countries. So this is the internal countries. And on the right-hand side here, we see that we're trying to map to countries from the ISO 3166 standard. And I can sit here and start typing in Australia, and I would be able to choose Australia, and it would be a close map to Australia over here. But that would take me a long time. So let's see what TopRight Edge can do for me to help me get my task done on time very quickly and save the day. So underneath reports, I'm going to choose problems and suggestions. Now this is a report that runs a bunch of different gears inside of TopRight Edge: inference rules, checking validation, constraints, all kinds of goodness going on underneath the hood there. But for a crosswalk, I want exact matches to be done first. So yes, I have problems and suggestions here. That's what each of these different objects are. But if I slide my confidence meter up to 100%, I can filter out anything that was what you could think of maybe as an optional. I want the 100% confidence, and you'll see that what TopRight Edge has done is it's filtered it down to just those exact matches where it used the metadata that was available to it to make the suggestion of providing a close match between things like Slovenia and Slovenia and Spain and Spain. And I'm all for this because it just made my job a lot easier than sitting there and manually creating that crosswalk. So I'm going to approve these. And with that, go back to the mappings. And we'll see that TopRight Edge has made every mapping that it was possible of. Let me expand this a little bit, get a little more in view here. And you'll see we have Australia mapped to Australia, Bulgaria to Bulgaria. And it's interesting, what we have missing is the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And if you remember, in my second task, I didn't fully commit that workflow. So we did actually bring Czech Republic and Slovakia into existence, but this is using the production copy. And because I didn't make those changes in that ISO task, I didn't fully commit because I would have had to have changed roles over to Bob to provide the approval to commit to production. We see that there's actually two things missing here, those two countries that we need. And I can come back later and manually map these or use the problems and suggestions report once we do have that approval and the tasks are actually complete. We would be able to have these fully filled in, which is a really nice feature. And with that, I think Tony's tasks are all done. So I'm going to mark this one as resolved. And I see I'm actually still really good on time. So before giving it back to Jack, let's see what we can do with these reference data sets directly here inside of TopRight Edge. So that crosswalk is now available for export to spreadsheet. It's available from APIs, and it's also available as an asset collection here inside of TopRight Edge, which means I can bring it into view just like I was able to bring the countries into view in my inside of my product codes. So I want to make sure that my internal countries here under the settings tab includes that crosswalk that we just created. So I'll start typing in crosswalk here and I'll select that. And what that has done is it's provided a kind of like a micro evolution to my country codes. Let's take a look at them. And if I click on, say, Australia once again here, you'll see that very minimalistic internal country code representation. I have some characteristics, but now I have a close match to Australia. And if I click on Australia, you'll see that this is the ISO Australia. And if I click down on Bulgaria on the right-hand side and I click on Bulgaria, you'll see that this is the ISO Bulgaria. And we have a lot of richness here for Bulgaria with all of the different languages. So this is proof that when my company does make an evolution from the internal country codes to a standard country code reference data set, there's only one link needing to be updated, and that is the jump from the internal country to the actual country. And even if we don't make that change, the web services and the API for this and users, even just navigating like I am here, they have access to all of this rich metadata. So even if I was to start with a product ID, in 2 jumps, I would actually be able to see the French label for the full name of Bulgaria. So all of the connections are here. And as I said earlier, connections are important. And that's what TopRight Edge is really all about with its semantic models. Let me think, what else? Okay, let's actually search for products, right? Because we started the day off with product IDs and the product catalog being brought into existence inside of TopRight Edge. Well, using Search the Edge here on the home page, the search box, let's just search on the word product to see what TopRight Edge knows about products. And I get a bunch of different types of things that match product here. You can see I've got concepts, I've got database columns, database views, tables, all different kinds of entities inside of TopRight Edge that match the keyword product. Now, product ID is the one that I'm looking for here. So I'm going to click on the More button. And on the right-hand side, you'll get that main view for the metadata about the thing that we're focused on. And the thing is product ID. And here you can see it's a database column. Now, as Tony learned in the last webinar in this series that TopRight Edge can automatically profile things like relational databases. So the Northwinds data example here was auto-consumed over JDBC and profiled and linked with human definitions as in the glossaries, as well as machine understandable definitions that can automatically check the validation and quality of the data in these columns. But with reference data being our focus today, we can take a database column a step further and we can make it actually know that its permissible values should be coming from that reference data set. So whenever you have a product ID, that product ID should be coming from the reference data. So let me click on Edit here for product ID. And underneath the data element properties, you'll see permissible values is here. And what I need to do is I need to tell Northwinds dataset to include my reference dataset, just like we have a few other times today using the settings page. So under the settings page, using my includes, I'll start typing in product and choose the product catalog. And now whenever I go back to my assets, let me refilter down on product ID. I believe there's going to be more than one. Let's search on product ID. Now I could actually do a select all and bulk edit on these, but I'm just going to continue to work with this one. Let's say this one here from the invoices table. So product ID here, and now whenever I go back to edit, I can now, because this asset collection has access to the product IDs, I can now set the permissible value under the data elements properties header and choosing the permissible values. Permissible values now includes more things than it ever included before. Whenever I first came here, I wasn't able to choose any of these, and the one that I'm looking for is the product code of products from the product catalog. So the semantic analysis inside of TopRight Edge knows that this is what I'm trying to make a connection to. And by saving my changes, we should actually be presented with some samplings here once this repopulates. And here you go. We now know that product ID is a column of this database, and whenever that column has values, those values should look like this. And now any user or any machine accessing this type of metadata inside of TopRight Edge is aware of these kinds of qualities. So we're getting a little tight on time, so I'm going to hand it back to Jack now to wrap up for the day. And thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. Can you or someone let me know whether you're able to see my screen?
I'm seeing it now, Jack. Thank you.
That's great. Okay, well, that was a really great presentation, Jesse. And you've all just seen Jesse, as Tony, a reference data steward, use TopRight Edge features that you see here on the slide to connect new reference data to data assets and to existing reference data for understanding and for meaningful use. Without leaving the governance environment, he collaborated with Bob, the data governance officer, to bring product ID codes under governance. And here are a few of the tasks you saw him demonstrate. And he also handled two additional tasks. Since country codes are critical reference data for product ID, Bob and Tony took this opportunity to update the country codes as well. And working again with the data governance officer, but this time in a formal approval workflow, you saw Jesse clone the country codes data to version old codes. This enabled him to create a backup and to import the updated codes into the master data set without deleting the deprecated codes that may still be needed for legacy applications. Edge made these operations straightforward and available to audit tracking. And finally, a comparison report also confirmed the update to be as expected. Finally, in the third task, we saw an interesting additional real-world twist in that the company maintains legacy reference data of country codes that are used internally. Using Edge, the relationship between these internal country codes and the ISO 3166 standardized country codes were attached and captured in a crosswalk that establishes equivalency. Jesse used the problem and suggestions report to automatically recommend and create mappings that describe this equivalency. And Christy, I think we agreed to pause here for our last poll.
Yes, Jack, that's correct. If you'll go ahead and share that poll. And as Jack mentioned, this is the last one for the day, and we appreciate any feedback. Okay, great. Thank you. Everyone should see that on their screen now. The question is it important to stay within the same software solution or have separate solutions for multiple areas of data governance? So if you could just choose one of the following responses. Do you prefer to stay within the same solution for all of your data governance needs? Is it okay to have separate solutions for reference data management and other data governance areas? You're not sure, you need further information, or maybe it's too early in the process. Or you only need reference data management at this point. So if you'll just take a couple of seconds to respond. Jack, I think we may be good to go if you want to share those results.
Okay, you should see them.
There they are. Okay, so overwhelmingly you prefer to stay with the same solution. All right, thank you so much for that response, Jack. I'll let you wrap it up before we take questions.
Okay, Christy. A few more reflections to share about managing reference data in a comprehensive governance environment, and then I'll pass it back to Christy and we'll take some questions. So Edge centralizes and manages reference data so that updates happen in controlled and explicit ways. As a flexible source of authority, Edge can store an enterprise standard version of specific reference data and variations on an enterprise standard or both as needed. I noticed we did actually have a question about that come in. What if we have multiple standards that we use? When variations on an enterprise standard are needed, crosswalks to the enterprise standard can be built, just like you saw Jesse built them for one, to preserve meaning across all of the variations. Typically, to preserve existing architecture and operation, exports from any of these stored reference data sets can be used to update locally stored reference data that are used by applications. Edge services can validate the local copy of reference data against what's stored in Edge as a master copy to verify that updates have been completed correctly. And finally, Edge notifications driven from approval workflows can keep everyone informed. Jesse mentioned the notion of a microevolution, or even that the data governance strategy of a company could be evolving. Well, as the enterprise architecture and the governance approach evolves, Edge also supports a more advanced direct API access to reference data sets that are stored in Edge. This approach, fetching reference data directly from Edge, would greatly simplify enterprise architecture, operations, and maintenance. So as a last perspective here, I want to take just a moment to place Jesse's demo in the context of governance and of our previous webinars in this series, Applied Data Governance. Many of you may have seen the previous webinars leading up to today's introduction to managing reference data within a governance framework. In our first webinar that you see here, a business steward responsible for enterprise terminology built a rich glossary. In the second webinar, a technical data steward was responsible for data and its use in various applications. He created assets describing these with profile results and descriptive metadata, and he then connected these assets to the glossary to make them more meaningful. In today's webinar, as a reference data steward, Jesse created assets containing reference data and then linked these to the previous data assets as permissible values. You may remember that he did this specifically for reference data about product IDs. And finally, he suggested that reference data from different systems might be aligned through crosswalks. He then demonstrated how it's also possible, again using crosswalks, to automate the alignment of an internal reference data set, or possibly multiple internal reference data sets, country codes in this case, with an authoritative single source. He used the ISO 3166, managed externally as an industry standard. Collectively, this slide and our previous webinars capture the importance and the value of governing information like reference data inside of a larger governance architecture. How does Edge actually enable this? The power and ability of Edge to do this lives in how it represents the data. Edge gathers these things and relationships together to build extended networks called knowledge graphs. Knowledge graphs tame complexity by making relationship as important as the things they connect. And they manage the identity of all of these by making both things and relationships unique and machine readable by other systems for reference, search enhancement, analysis, and good decision making. They do this simply and flexibly. How? Well, a collection of W3C standards forms a common language, allowing communication across departments in diverse siloed data contexts. These standards stack together in a system that allows us to say things, to share a common vocabulary for saying them, to meaningfully organize what we're saying, to ask about what has been said, and finally to verify all of this with rules and against constraints. These standards afford data portability, interoperability, collaboration, and consistency. And the main point that each of these webinars expressed is that good data governance is about connection. And TopRight Edge's knowledge graph technology enables these connections to be made between any type of information assets in any type of organization. In the demo, you saw Jesse make newly imported reference data about product IDs more meaningful across the company by connecting it to existing internal country codes. And beyond that, to industry standards that represent the company's strategic direction. In fact, in the future, these could be further enriched, if desired, by simply connecting to additional reference data describing possibly regional or former country codes. Well, that's about as much of an overview as I can share in this short time about how these very capable technologies enable connection to redefine data governance. The benefits of all this: Edge provides a central system where reference data will live and be maintained. Maintenance activities like adding new codes are done once, not multiple times, reducing authoring time and effort in making changes to reference data. Metadata stored with codes allows end users who use reference data to better understand the meaning of these codes and, as a result, avoid mistakes of using wrong codes. Edge, as a single central source of authority, promotes accuracy and consistency in integration. Administrators can trust that exports of code tables are correct and up to date with all the fields they need. Reference data management in TopRight Edge provides the source that can be used as inputs for every code table in every database in the production landscape. And finally, Edge promotes better and more meaningful reporting and analytics. It enables the right categorization and organization of data by providing a place for report writers to go to better understand the meanings of reference data and how it's used across the different systems. Taken together, governing reference data in TopRight Edge rather than simply managing it in a dedicated tool provides substantial bottom line benefits. You see several here. To close our webinar, TopRight Edge provides comprehensive governance because it's not just a tool. It's a complete, pre-built semantic data governance framework. Edge models, features, and capabilities provide the coverage, flexibility, and insight needed for an effective data governance infrastructure. We've spoken about Edge's flexibility and extensibility. Because of the semantic standards we use, we can talk about any types of things and relationships. And because of knowledge graph technology, we can map anything to anything. Edge minimizes what you have to understand, design, and create because pre-built enterprise and governance models reduce cost and accelerate your work. And finally, these flexible connections enable complex queries across the enterprise for meaningful insights. That finishes what we have to share today about reference data management in TopRight Edge. And I'll turn the podium back to Christy, who will manage our question and answer session. Christy?
Thank you, Jack. And we are right at the hour, so we may have to forego taking questions at this point. We will be answering the questions and providing answers to the questions that you guys have asked. There's several here that I can see. We'll respond via an email response to all attendees. That email will also provide a link to the recorded presentation as well as the slides, so be on the lookout for that. We do hope you found today's information valuable, and thank you for your attention and interest, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.